Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, months after the delivery of 500,000 Astrazeneca vaccines, and Ivory Coast is still struggling to get people into vaccination centres. Suspicion and unfounded rumours have fuelled fear about the jams. Also, around 150,000 Burundian refugees have been staying at camps in Tanzania, having fled their homeland because of violent political unrest that began in 2015. 6 years later, and Dodoma is trying to send them back, but many fear that the country remains unsafe. And My Octopus Teacher schools its rivals and is named as Best Documentary at the Oscars. The South African film is a heartwarming tale of the bond between a diver and an octopus. But first, Africa is struggling to get all the vaccination it needs, so each dose is precious. However, take-up for available shots has been slow across parts of the continent because of scepticism and suspicion about the inoculations. Our team reports from Ivory Coast.
Empty chairs, bored staff, and patients like Basile occasionally trickling in.
La maladie, c'est pas d'amusement. C'est injuste, c'est la réelle. Donc j'invite tous mes frères et sœurs, ceux qui ne courent pas la maladie, de venir se faire vacciner.
Since the arrival of 504,000 doses of Astrazeneca at the end of February under the COVAX scheme, followed up by a donation of 50,000 more doses from India, fewer than 100,000 people have received a jab in Ivory Coast.
Compte tenu de l'actualité des réseaux sociaux, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui sont réticentes. Donc vraiment, le volet communication doit s'intensifier pour que les gens viennent se faire vacciner. Il faut pas se le cacher, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui sont réticentes.
The suspension of the AstraZeneca vaccine in a number of European countries due to concerns over blood clots, doubts over the efficacy of the vaccine against the 501YV2 variant discovered in South Africa, and a mountain of fake news have dissuaded many Ivorians from getting vaccinated.
Si c'est moi, on n'a pas envoyé ça ici. Parce que c'est pas bon. Ça tue les gens.
Les vaccins qui nous viennent en Afrique, selon certains, c'est pour nous filer le virus.
The authorities remain confident and have expanded their target, now offering the vaccine to all adults.
Nous faisons aussi une surveillance épidémiologique et à ce jour, nous n'avons pas encore détecté de cas graves d'effets secondaires et aussi pas de thrombose. Donc nous voulons rassurer.
Less than 0.5% of the Ivorian population have received a vaccination so far. 60% would have to be vaccinated in order to achieve herd immunity, a target that is for now a long way off.
French energy firm Total has suspended work on its $20 billion gas project in northern Mozambique because of the extremist insurgency there. The blow's a move to the country, which is counting on the economic growth expected to come from the project. Nicolas Chumin has more.
These are pictures on Total's website of its $20 billion liquefied natural gas project in northern Mozambique. The French energy giant has just announced it is suspending its work there following the latest jihadist attack on a nearby town last month. Total declared force majeure, which allows it to cancel contractors. Mozambique's National Petroleum Institute stressed that Total had not abandoned the project. Last month's attack forced 50,000 people to flee the town of Palma.
Manyumba nkuta moto, wana wankuatwala, wanu wankusinjiwa, wanu wankulaiwa kwa mabunduki. Wepatika tukuta, yambi kutukuta kati tukuta, ati kutukuta ndikuwira tena panyuma ndikuona matokeo ya kukaya.
The World Food Programme says the situation is critical.
What we know is that people have been walking for days, some as many as 5-6 days. They've hidden in the bush, again without food and water, just escaping with what they have.
The jihadist insurgency began in 2017 in the gas-rich Cabo Delgado province. Since then, at least 2,600 people have been killed, according to the NGO ACLED. The government estimates that more than 700,000 people have been displaced because of the violence.
Around 150,000 Burundian nationals have been living in Tanzania's refugee camps. Most fled the violence that followed the contested re-election of late President Pierre Nkurunziza. 6 years later, Tanzania wants refugees to go back home, but many say that they're still too afraid. Shelley Sitbin has more.
This ceremony features traditional Burundi dances and music. But some of the refugees watching it are too tired to keep their eyes open. They've been living in Tanzania refugee camps for years after escaping violence in their country. This specific ceremony was organized to encourage refugees to cross the border back into Burundi.
I haven't come here to invite you to return to your country or not, but the fact is that at present Tanzania has no reason to continue receiving refugees from Burundi, so keep registering to return home voluntarily.
About 300,000 people have fled Burundi since the 2015 electoral violence. Tanzania has taken in half of them to refugee camps exclusively. Some have returned to Burundi in recent months. Others believe it's still too dangerous there.
Tanzania has received us well, but attitudes have begun to change. Officials come from time to time and tell us to go home and build our country. But a refugee is not forced to return home to build a country. Usually a refugee is the one who knows why he fled his country.
A UN report from this month says Tanzania must stop pressing refugees to leave. And more, it has received testimonies saying people who were political opponents in Burundi have been abducted, arbitrarily detained, and some have been returned by force to Burundi, where they have been arrested. Some have disappeared. The UN has helped refugees who do want to return to Burundi to make that trip safely.
Ivorians are doing more and more of their shopping online. By 2025, e-commerce is expected to account for 10% of all sales. But with much of the business happening informally, the government's struggling to collect taxes from online operators. Thais Brook and Sam Bradpiece tell us more.
These three entrepreneurs began distance working long before the pandemic. They are constantly on their phones. 3 years ago, they started selling men's clothing on Facebook and Instagram before setting up their own website.
Au départ, c'était pour peut-être avoir quelque chose en attendant un travail à la fonction publique ou autre chose. Mais après, quand nous avons vu que l'impact que ça pouvait avoir, nous sommes lancés sans hésiter.
Marketing their goods through social media allowed them to reach a large clientele and make considerable savings.
On paye moins les charges qu'une boutique normale pourrait payer. Nous, on se base seulement à domicile.
Because they operate informally, they pay no tax, but online merchants still need to have the goods delivered, so the government's changed the rules for all delivery drivers. They now have to pay for a license that costs 5 million CFA francs or 7,600 euros per year.
C'est un peu abusé, parce que la majorité de ceux qui font les livraisons, ce sont les étudiants. Moi, pour ça, je suis étudiant en droit. Voilà, j'ai fini ma licence, je me suis arrêté là pour le moment, et je me débrouille en faisant mes livraisons. Donc imaginez, vous demandez à un étudiant de payer les 5 millions. Si moi j'ai les 5 millions, je vais investir dans un projet.
The new rules have failed to take off as few drivers have paid up. The vast majority continue to operate illegally.
The University of Cape Town appears to have suffered some of the most damage in the aftermath of one of the worst blazes the city's seen in years. Parts of a near 100-year-old library containing rare manuscripts on African studies has been lost.
Out-of-print literature, hand-drawn maps, rare films and archives documenting seminal moments in South African history. Much of the Jagger Reading Room's collection has gone up in smoke.
It was horrifying. It was a deep-seated sadness that this had to happen, because there are some things that are irreplaceable. There are some things we can buy in the future, but there are those elements that are irreplaceable and you will never know where to get them from.
There were 85,000 books and 3,500 films in the reading room, which was built in the 1930s and was home to the University of Cape Town's Special Collections Library. As staff take stock of the damage, about half of the collection is expected to be lost, including many African studies books. The other half on the lower floors was saved after being sealed off behind steel shutters. Academics are anxiously waiting to hear the fate of a few items in particular, including an important series of interviews with prisoners on Robben Island from the 1870s,
and a Dutch Bible from 1535 believed to be the oldest in South Africa. Thankfully, many of the works have been digitised, though for some scholars, it'll never be the same as the real thing.
South African film My Octopus Teacher won the Oscar for Best Documentary this month. It's a heartwarming tale of the relationship between a human and an octopus. Take a look.
A lot of people say an octopus is like an alien. But the strange thing is, as you get closer to them, you realize that we're very similar in a lot of ways. It's a hard thing to explain, but sometimes you just get a feeling and you know there's something to this creature that's very unusual. There's something to learn here.
Well, the film follows a diver as he explores the octopus's underwater world. But as our Sam Brad piece says, there is also a far more universal message behind it.
The action takes place in the Great African Kelp Forest in the icy waters off the coast of Cape Town. My Octopus Teacher tells the story of the remarkable relationship between filmmaker Craig Foster and an octopus. Now, the incredibly strong bond, the almost loving bond that Foster builds with his subject allows the production team to get incredible access into the life of these amazing aquatic creatures. But the film's associate producer told us that it's also about so much more than that.
We've created nation states, we've created borders, we've created religions, we've created all these things that separate us from each other. But what nature actually teaches you is you're home. You're a child of this planet. It doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what your economic background might be, what your caste, creed, religion, color. It doesn't matter. You are a child of this planet and you belong.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa actually wrote to the production team to congratulate them for the various accolades that they've picked up with this film. He said the documentary was important in not only raising awareness of life in the ocean, but also raising appreciation. Now, it's worth remembering that about 2/3 of the world's marine ecosystems are degraded, according to the UN. Now, to this end, the President Cyril Ramaphosa said he was delighted that the film would be translated into various South African languages, and he called for it to be shown in schools across the country.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.